Hello and welcome back to this series of Every Game Ranked, in which I take a classic game from the 8-bit era and look at every version of it on the BBC Micro in my quest to find out which version really was the best. If you've not already seen them, do go and check out the first 3 episodes where I ranked every Space Invaders game, every Centipede game, and every Pac-Man game for the Beeb. In this 4th episode, I'll be looking at 8 variations of the original 1981 Williams Arcade Cabinet Stunner, Defender. I've been pretty strict with my definition, which is why I've kept it down to just 8 games, so without further ado, let's get started. Number 8, Defender, developed by Grant Evans and published by Interface Publications in 1983. Well, of course, looking at this game, you must be wondering how I could possibly have been mean enough to bring it in right at the bottom. Well, let me count the ways. I was honestly in 2 minds about whether to include this game at all, considering how loosely it resembles the Williams original. The most obvious omission is the lack of any kind of left or right movement, let alone scrolling. Here, we're reduced to moving very, very slowly, up and down, and firing again very, very slowly, our red laser, to try and take out the aliens as they make off with our fuel cells. The concept of defense is here, though, as we have to prevent them from absconding with the fuel by killing them before they reach the top. If we do so, the fuel falls back down and is added back to our inventory. The controls here are, let's be frank, appalling. It's clearly a BBC Basic game, and there doesn't appear to have been any inline assembly code used to give the controls a boost. Everything moves through the game loop one by one, making the whole thing feel really sluggish. There is a nice touch in that the laser continues to fire through an alien, meaning that you can take out multiple in a row, but equally you can shoot the fuel cells and nothing happens, which feels like a bug to me. After all, in the original Defender, you could accidentally kill the people you were tasked with defending, and that's always been a key feature of the game for me. All in all, this one has very limited gameplay or potential, and it's all over very abruptly if the aliens do get all of your fuel cells airborne. So, let's move on. Number 7, Defendor. Developed by Stephen Gray and published by Home Computing Weekly in 1985. While this game is a definite improvement on the last entry, we can at least now move left and right as well as being able to reverse, it's definitely the We've Got Defender at Home entry of the episode. It sort of looks like Defender, in much the same way as the title sort of sounds like Defender, and it has the concept of aliens picking up hapless humans at the bottom of the screen and whisking them away. But it's also another BBC Basic game, and so each key press is like sending a signal light years through space and waiting for a response. It does have a jaunty jingle, as well as a comical honk sound when you do manage to strike an alien with your laser. Perhaps in an attempt to make it a bit more challenging, the game has an unorthodox inclusion of mid-air obstacles, presumably some kind of barrage balloon array. Each level is over the moment you kill the last alien, but there is a rather long pause before the next one loads, which is a little frustrating. Death is instantaneous if you touch, well, anything, which includes the ground, the aliens, and those blue and red obstacles. Perhaps the biggest black mark, though, is that there's no real opportunity to defend anything. Defend? Because as soon as an alien has hold of a human, they're toast, and so are you. For a type-in game, it's not completely without merit, and is perhaps what an estate agent would call a fixer-upper. Maybe with some time and patience, this could be built upon, although without any proper left and right scrolling, it fails to meet the full criteria of a proper Defender game, much like the title. Number 6, Moonpod, developed by Eric Pope and published by L-Bug magazine in 1985. Here we actually start to see the general principles of Defender at work. We can actually defend! The game feels a lot more like a demo than a true game, as the level is really more of a loop and only ever features one alien and one human to save. What is more, the game suffers from one of my least favourite mechanics, namely insta-death. There are no lives here, which means it's very hard to make much progress, as I am amply demonstrating in my game footage. That said, unlike the last 2 entries, the controls are excellent and respond really well. It's a fast game, and by no means easy either. What is more, this is originally an Electron game, making its speed and overall performance all the more impressive. While it's got very little in the way of sound effects, and I'd probably argue that those error beeps for killing an alien take more away from the game than they add, the explosion of your ship is not too shabby, and that happens a lot. I do really appreciate that it lets you defend properly, and that you can also accidentally kill the human, which, like everything in this game, means going back to the beginning. All in all, for a type-in, and for an Electron type-in at that, this is a pretty good demo. It might not be a very good game of Defender, but it's a great demonstration of the art of the possible. Number 5. Dune Hunter, developed by Gordon J. Key and published by the Micro-User in 1987. Now on first impressions, this looks like an entry that finally lives up to the original Williams arcade game, perhaps with even more polish in terms of graphics and boisterous sound effects. No question about it, this is a fun game, and it's a real treat for the eyes and ears. It has the classic thrust, reverse, up and down controls of a true Defender game, and we have alien menaces galore attacking our craft. Not only are we equipped with a laser, but we also have the smart bomb to blow up everything in sight, and on top of that, a superb rendition of hyperspace, which doesn't simply pop us out of existence and into it again at a new position. It causes us to zoom through space at incredible speed before stopping at our destination. I personally love the effect, as it's very much like going into warp speed in Star Trek. However, despite all of the good points about this game, there's nothing to defend here. We don't have humans on the surface, not even fuel cells. We're just patrolling a barren landscape and blowing up evil droids. Now, admittedly, the game's name gives no indication of us needing to save anyone from anything. It is, after all, Dune Hunter, not Dune Messiah. But in my pursuit for the best version of Defender, not having anything to defend does rather count against it. It's also hard as nails. I wasn't able to make much progress, as the scale of bad guys just seems to increase the more I shoot at them. All the same, it is a good game and worthy of its position at the midpoint in the rankings table. It also has a tremendous bit of game intro music, especially for a type-in, although like most of Gordon Key's type-ins, I suspect it was his own clever machine code compressed into a dizzying series of data statements. Imagine this blasting out of your Beeb back in the day though. Definitely one for the parents there. Number 4. Infinite Porridge, developed and self-published by Alec Barker in 2024. No, you've not accidentally switched videos. This is still every game of Defender ranked for the Beeb, and while this may not look much like the last few entries, believe me, it's as valid as any other in this episode. Yes, this is a wonderfully eccentric take on the original game, featuring a dog flying a plane, taking on sheep-stealing cyborg dogs with nothing more than porridge in infinite quantity. It may or may not have been inspired by a certain claymation movie, but I think we can all agree it's cracking. Have I brought this in slightly higher than others might, given my penchant for wacky games featuring breakfast foodstuffs in their name? Well, I'll let you decide, but suffice to say this game is brilliant. It also, unlike Dune Hunter, lets us defend, which is a key ingredient for a good Defender game. Speaking of ingredients, unlike every other game in this episode, we can also press J at the start for jam in our porridge. This does nothing more than change the colour of our projectiles, but I think it's a delightfully silly addition given that the game doesn't support joysticks. In terms of gameplay, it's all about splatting the cyborg dogs with porridge as quickly as you can. If they do nab a sheep, you can still splat them, and the sheep will be released without you needing to catch it. However, if you're too close when splatting a sheep-bearing dog, you'll end up the worse for it, as the debris will take out your plane. The keys respond beautifully here, and it's clearly been put together with love. Honestly, eccentric though it might be, it's really playable, and I highly recommend you give it a go. It only came out last year, so the chances are that you might not have heard of it. Now you have, so there's no excuse. Infinite Porridge awaits. Number 3. Gauntlet, developed by Chris Terran and published by Micropower in 1984. While we're firmly in Defender territory now, Gauntlet is an excellent edition of the Williams original. This one was written for the Electron and subsequently ported to the Beeb, where it runs just as well. The graphics are sharp and the sound effects judiciously chosen. It flies along and it's a real joy to play. All the key elements of Defender are here, including the ability to defend and save the humans, transporting them safely back to the ground, as well as the full complement of laser, smart bombs and hyperspace capabilities, the latter of which comes with its own risks, of course. We also have a space map at the top, which is key to being able to play the game effectively. Gauntlet is well loved by Electron users, and you can clearly see why. It stays true to the game while providing a few graphical flourishes all of its own. It's speedy and it handles well. My only real criticism is that there is a small degree of flickering that very slightly interferes with the overall enjoyment of the game. Particularly when switching into reverse or slowing down from an accelerated thrust, there is a screen refresh issue that gives rise to a very slight flicker. Not that this in any way makes the game unplayable, of course, far from it. But as we approach the top spot, small details like this have to be taken into account. However, my overall judgment of Gauntlet is that it's a superb edition of Defender, and one that did the Electron proud, as well as the Beeb. Number 2. Guardian, developed by Steve Evans and published by Alligator in 1984. By this point, we're surely reaching the stage of as good as it gets, Defender-wise. If you had an Electron and a copy of Guardian back in the day, it would have been as good as having the Defender arcade cabinet itself in your bedroom. Guardian handles supremely well, flying along at pace and with seeming ease. You can take out enemies at speed, and with the very accurate map at the top, the game is yours to command. Now, I am not the world's greatest Defender player, but I have to say that playing Guardian feels really intuitive. Even a shoddy player like me can have a really good run on it and come away feeling like a champ. Given none of the games we've looked at in this episode, including Guardian, were official ports of Defender, I can only guess at the number of hours Steve Evans must have spent at the arcades playing the game and getting a deep understanding of its gameplay and its dynamics. This game really does come scarily close to the original, lacking just one tiny but significant feature that would have made it almost perfect. There's no explosion sound effect when your ship gets hit. That's a real key ingredient of Defender, and I think if the game had just had that one extra feature, it would have been not only the best version of Defender on the Electron, but maybe on the Beeb as well. That is, were it not for the existence of the game that has actually claimed the top spot. Number 1. Planetoid, developed by Neil Rain and published by Acornsoft in 1982. Yes, of course, it had to be Acornsoft's powerhouse arcade game Planetoid. As all Beeb users know, this game was originally released as Defender, but had to be hastily renamed to avoid legal troubles with the big cheeses over at Williams. Seeing and playing Planetoid, as it had to be known by this point, you can understand why. The game is shockingly similar to the Williams original, to the extent that I know of no other 8-bit home computer that could boast as good a Defender game as the Beeb's Planetoid. Feel free to leave me comments below if you feel otherwise, but I've played the arcade original and I've played Planetoid. There's scarce little difference between them. I can't speak for him, but I do wonder if Tricky never looked at doing his own port of Defender precisely because the Acornsoft version is already pretty much spot on. Mind you, that's not to say that everyone felt the same way about it. On the Complete BBC Games Archive site, there are at least 2 hacks of Planetoid available. One, called Super Defender, makes some subtle enhancements to the graphics, as well as letting you set certain game parameters like difficulty, number of lives, and other options. Then there's Chopper 2, which is a mod from M. Beaton, giving the game a complete set of new sprites, changing the spaceship to a helicopter, and all of the aliens to, well, different aliens, I suppose. Nice as these mods are, and I salute anyone who can take an original 8-bit Beeb game and reskin it like this, I personally don't think that they add much to the original Planetoid, which for me remains the greatest version of Defender, not only on the Beeb, but on any home micro. Neil Rain did a truly fantastic job, and it continues to be hugely playable and enjoyable to this day, even if I'm not particularly good at it. So there you have it, all 8 versions of Defender for the Beeb ranked. While the number 1 spot may have come as no surprise, hopefully you've learnt about 1 or 2 other variants, as indeed I did making this video, and you'll have some other Defender games to try out, as well as maybe 1 or 2 to avoid. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this episode of Every Game Ranked and that you'll join me for the next video in the series. But until then, goodbye!